What if the most powerful man in the room wasn't wearing medals or barking orders, but sweeping the floor in silence? What if the person everyone ignored was once the one they all owed their lives to? This is not a story about war. It's a story about honor, about choices, about a man who walked away from the battlefield only to find a deeper purpose behind a broom. You're about to discover the most extraordinary military story never told. One that will challenge what you think makes a hero and remind you that true leadership often wears no rank. Stay with us, because sometimes the most unforgettable legends are the ones hiding in plain sight. He swept the floor like it mattered, like the way dust settled on concrete was a kind of code, and he was the only one who knew how to read it. Each stroke of the broom was deliberate, not rushed, not lazy, just precise. The way you'd expect a surgeon to handle a scalpel or a sniper to squeeze a trigger. Most people didn't notice him, and that's exactly how he liked it. To the young men who came and went at the shooting range, he was just the janitor. Old boots, worn flannel shirt, ball cap, pulled low, gray in his beard, a slight limp in his walk. Some called him Old Man. Others just nodded. Maybe tossed him a half-hearted morning. He never said much back, just nodded. Swept, watched. There was something about him, though. Something still. Not the kind of stillness that comes from age, but the kind you feel before a storm, like the wind holding its breath, like a predator waiting in tall grass. He never touched the rifles on the rack, never gave advice, never asked questions. But sometimes, just sometimes, when a young recruit struggled to center his aim, the old man's eyes would narrow and then shift away. Back to the floor. Back to the dust. He'd seen a lot of dust. Different kinds. The chalky red of desert combat zones. The fine white of marble corridors in government buildings. The dark gray kind that clung to boots after a mission gone wrong. Now, it was just this. A shooting range on the edge of the city. Civilians on weekends, cadets on weekdays. Gunfire in the air like clockwork. Pop, pop, pop. He never flinched. Didn't even blink. The sound of bullets was like rain to him. Familiar almost. Soothing. Some days new instructors would try to shoo him away from the training zones. Hey, this area's off limits. You need to clean somewhere else. He'd nod. Move to a corner, keep sweeping. But he always had a way of being just close enough. Close enough to see who flinched at the recoil, who gritted their teeth when they missed, who stared too long at the target like it had insulted them, and who looked away, ashamed, angry, afraid. He'd seen all kinds, and every now and then he'd mutter something low, not loud enough to be instruction, just a whisper to the dust. Left shoulders too high. Breathing's all off. You're fighting the trigger, but no one really listened. Why would they? He was the janitor, just a guy with a broom. No one ever asked why his eyes were so sharp, why he always stood with one shoulder slightly back, like he was ready to pivot, or why his fingers, though calloused, moved with the kind of grace that didn't come from mopping floors. Sometimes, late at night, after everyone had gone home, he'd pick up a piece of chalk and walk to the farthest lane. He'd draw a perfect circle on the target board, stand back, lift an invisible rifle, hold his breath, then exhale, then leave. Never fired a shot, never needed to, because legends don't need witnesses, they just need time. It started like any other Thursday. The sky was a bleached-out blue, the kind that made the heat feel heavier than it should. Inside the range, the smell of gunpowder already hung in the air like old perfume. He was there early, as always. Sweeping, the entrance, straightening chairs, checking targets that others would soon blast to pieces. Then came the rumble. Not thunder, engines, big ones, military. A convoy of tan Humvees rolled into the parking lot, tires crunching gravel, doors slamming in. Rhythm, they poured out like clockwork, young, loud, full of sweat and swagger. A dozen new recruits, and one man leading them. Instructor Wallace, square-jawed, crew-cut, barking orders before his boots even hit the ground. These kids need precision, he shouted to no one in particular. They've been soft too long. Today they learn how to shoot. He glanced at the janitor. Barely, didn't nod, didn't speak. Just walked past like he was background noise. The recruits did worse. One elbowed another. Hey, look at Grandpa with the broom. Snickering laughter. Think he sweeps up shell. Casings with that limp? They didn't whisper. Didn't care if he heard. He didn't flinch, didn't look up, just kept sweeping, just like always. Wallace lined them up at the lanes. Targets were set. The echo of first shots rang out, scattered. And messy. Keep your arms tight, Wallace barked. Don't yank the trigger like it owes you money. Recoil kicked back. Shots went wide. Frustration grew. One recruit, tall, lanky, clearly overthinking, couldn't hit center to save his life. He cursed under his breath. Shook. Out his arms. Tried again. Missed again. The janitor paused nearby, sweeping shell casings into a neat line. Then, barely audible, ease your breath. Let it flow out when you squeeze. The recruit turned, frowning. What did you say? Wallace snapped. Don't listen to him. He's not qualified to teach anything but mopping. More laughter. More shame. The old man just nodded and moved on. But the recruit, he tried it. Let out a breath. Eased his grip. Fired. The shot clipped the edge of center. He blinked, looked back, but the janitor was already gone. Back to the corner. Back to sweeping, back to dust. Wallace stared, said nothing, but his jaw was tight. He knew what he saw. The recruit started whispering. What was that? How did he? No one had answers. And that's when another set of boots entered the range. Heavier. Calmer. Someone older. Someone who knew how to read a room. And as his eyes scanned the facility, they locked on the janitor. And widened. Marcus. For a second, no one moved. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. The man who had just walked in was Colonel Brooks. Decorated, respected, feared even. The recruit stood straighter without being told. Wallace stepped forward, saluting quickly. Sir, I didn't expect... Brooks cut him off. He wasn't looking at Wallace. His eyes were locked on the janitor. Sergeant Marcus Delroy, he said, almost in disbelief. The room tensed. Wallace looked between them, confused. The recruits stopped. Whispering, the janitor, Marcus, gave a small nod. Brooks stepped closer. You're really here. I thought you were gone. Marcus gave a dry chuckle. Guess I never left far enough. Brooks looked him up and down. Still walking the line, huh? Still watching people miss it. Brooks smiled. But Wallace didn't. Sir, he said, slowly. You know this man? Brooks turned to him. Know him, he said. This man trained me. Gasps from the recruits. Wallace's face drained of color. He's a legend, Brooks continued. Highest accuracy rating in our units. History, one of the best eyes I've ever seen, Wallace stammered. I didn't know. Brooks raised an eyebrow. Maybe you should listen more than you talk. Silence. Thick, respectful. Marcus shook his head. I'm not here to teach, just sweep the floors. Brooks stepped beside him. You just did without saying a word. The recruits turned to Marcus now with different eyes. Eyes that saw, eyes that respected. But he didn't smile, didn't gloat, just kept his hand on the broom and swept. The sound echoed, softer than gunfire, but somehow louder. That night, the recruits couldn't stop talking. Whispers traveled like wildfire. Did you hear what the colonel said? Trained him? That guy? He's just a janitor, wasn't he? But in their minds, something shifted. Respect had crept in, silent as a sniper. The next morning, they arrived earlier than usual. More alert, more quiet. Eyes glanced toward the broom in the corner. But Marcus wasn't there. He'd gone. Out back. Alone. Standing on the range. Not sweeping, just staring at a set of distant targets. Colonel Brooks joined him. No words, just presence. They stood shoulder to shoulder, then Brooks spoke. You still see it, don't you? Marcus didn't look away. I never stopped. Brooks nodded slowly. Tell them. Marcus shook his head. They don't need stories. They need discipline. They need truth, Brooks replied. And with that, the past came rushing back. Iraq, Kandahar, Mosul, the dry wind, the smell of cordite. Orders barked over static, eyes behind the scope, breath held, targets marked. He was the best, always calm, always exact, every shot a message, every hit. Final. But there was one mission, the one they never spoke about, the one that ended everything. Brooks glanced over. You ever think about her? Marcus exhaled slowly. Every day. He didn't say her name, didn't need to. The woman in the hijab, the child in her arms, the red laser dot resting on her forehead. He was told she was the target, that she'd led bombings, planned executions. But in that moment, all he saw was a mother scared, shielding her baby. His finger on the trigger, frozen, they screamed in his earpiece. Take the shot. But he didn't. He couldn't. And that single decision unraveled his career. Mission failed. Leaders furious. He disobeyed a direct order. He cost lives. But Marcus knew better. He didn't kill innocents, even if it meant losing everything. Back. In the present, Brooks laid a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You chose right, even if no one else saw it. Marcus didn't answer. Didn't need to. His silence said more than words ever could, and for the first time, Brooks saw it. The weight Marcus carried, not just of medals, but of mercy, of judgment, and of ghosts. The kind that never leave, the kind you salute in the quiet corners of your mind. Marcus turned, broom in hand, ready to go back to dust, back to silence. But now, the silence had a name, and it echoed louder than any bullet ever could. The file was marked red, top secret, eyes only. Marcus remembered the briefing like it was yesterday. Dim room, cold coffee, a satellite photo slid across the table. She's the architect, the commander said. Civilian cover, 2 confirmed attacks. Trace to her. Marcus stared at the image. A woman in a scarf, carrying groceries, holding a child's hand. They're using her to smuggle explosives. She's a high-value target. He didn't speak, didn't flinch. His job wasn't to question, just to aim and end. The operation was set before dawn. He was dropped on a rooftop, 5 clicks out. Quiet wind, clear line of sight. Through the scope, he found her, moving casually, holding. The baby now, laughing with another woman. Through the crosshairs, the scene looked peaceful. Too peaceful. His finger hovered. Then the voice. Target confirmed. Fire on green. Green flashed in his scope, but his hand didn't move. She shifted slightly. The baby cooed. He zoomed in. Saw the child's eyes. Big, brown, innocent. His breath caught. Fire, Marcus. That's an order. But he couldn't. Not this one. His training. Fought him. His instinct froze. And then she disappeared behind a corner. Target lost. Mission failed. He exfiltrated silently. No bullets, no kills, just questions. By nightfall, the backlash had started. They called him reckless, coward, disloyal. Your hesitation compromised the entire team. No room for weakness in war. They stripped his insignia, filed his retirement, buried the mission under classified failure. Marcus didn't defend himself, didn't argue. He just packed what little he had and disappeared. Years passed. He found jobs no one wanted, cleaning, fixing, always quiet, always out of sight, until one day he wandered into the shooting range and stayed. No one asked, no one knew, until now. Back in the present, the young recruit, Nathan, approached him, eyes lowered. Voice. Careful. Sir, is it true? Marcus looked up. Is what true? That you didn't take the shot? Marcus leaned on the broom, stared at the range, then nodded once. Nathan frowned. But why? Marcus's voice was low, measured, because shooting is easy. He paused. It's the choosing that's hard. The recruits gathered now, silent, listening. Wallace stood in the back, no longer smug, just quiet. Marcus looked at them all. You'll be told who the enemy is. You'll be trained to shoot fast without thought. But one day, you'll see something they didn't brief you on. He pointed toward the target lane. And you'll have to decide, not just who you're aiming at, but who. You become when you pull that trigger. Silence again, but this time heavy with meaning. Marcus turned away, back to his corner, back to his broom. But now every step echoed. Because sometimes, the most powerful shot is the one you don't take. The next day felt different. The air at the range was still thick with gunpowder. But there was something else now. Awareness. Reverence. The recruits didn't laugh when Marcus walked by. They stood aside, cleared a path. Even Wallace gave a curt nod. No words. Just a silent truce. Marcus said nothing, just swept. But his presence meant more now, like a shadow that carried weight. Nathan approached again. This time not with questions, but a notebook. Blank. Open. Would you show me? He asked. Marcus didn't look up. Show you what? How to see, like you do. Marcus paused, then motioned with his head. Toward the far lane, Nathan followed. Marcus pointed at the paper target. Tell me what you see. Nathan squinted. Standard issue. Human silhouette. 25 yards. Marcus shook his head. No, not the specs, the shape, the lean, the tell. Nathan hesitated. Marcus stepped beside him. The left arm's lower. The shoulders tight, that's stress, anxiety, he continued. The tilt of the hips, injury, compensation. The feet, narrow stance, not grounded. Nathan blinked. It's a drawing. Marcus nodded. But everything's a story. Even on paper. Another recruit joined, then another. Soon, they formed a quiet circle. Listening, watching. Wallace stood at a distance, arms crossed. But he didn't interrupt, didn't sneer. He was learning. Marcus picked up a training rifle. Held it out, not for show, he said, for feel. One by one they tried. Grip, stance, breath. Correction after correction. Not shouted, just whispered. Like passing down secrets. Marcus didn't speak like an instructor. He spoke like a man remembering. And through that remembering, they were transformed. Nathan hit center mass twice, then again. Others followed. The laughter of arrogance was gone, replaced with something rarer. Quiet pride. Earned, not given. Brooks returned that afternoon, watched from the edge, smiled. He turned to Wallace. Looks like they've got a new teacher. Wallace exhaled, nodded. Yeah, and we've got a lot to learn. Marcus didn't take credit. Didn't need to. He just passed the broom to a rack. Sat down, watched the lane, watched them grow, one shot at a time. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. And sometimes it's earned without ever firing a single round. The next week brought a shift, not in the air, not in the weather, but in the spirit of the place. The range felt alive, not from the sounds of gunfire, but from focus, from purpose. Recruits arrived early, checked their gear, polished their sights. There was no more shouting, no more swagger, just determination. They weren't just learning to shoot. They were learning to see, to understand, to wait. Marcus was still the janitor, still wore the same flannel, still walked with a limp. But now, when he swept past a lane, they listened, they watched, they respected. He didn't ask for it, didn't expect it, but they gave it freely, and in return, he gave them all he had. Nathan's grouping was tighter, his posture relaxed. He breathed like a sniper, fired like one too. Wallace, once cold and dismissive, now took notes, asked questions, even practiced alone after hours. Brooks returned often, sometimes just to watch, sometimes to quietly nod at Marcus. One afternoon, Marcus found himself holding more than a broom, a clipboard. He was asked to observe, to advise. It wasn't official, but it mattered. It meant something. Only if you want to, Brooks had said. Marcus stared at the board, at the columns, names, scores, details. He sighed and said yes. He never stood at the front, never barked commands. But when he spoke, they leaned in. He broke down wind resistance, discussed heartbeat timing, taught. Them the rhythm between calm and chaos. His lessons weren't just tactical, they were human. Understand the shot before you take it, he'd say. Understand yourself even more. In time, the squad began to shine. Not the best marksman, but the most aware, disciplined, dangerous in all the right ways. Their progress didn't go unnoticed. Another unit came to observe, then another. Soon, the range was no longer just a place to train, it became a place to transform. A place where ghosts whispered lessons and redemption stood behind the line. Marcus still swept at the end of each day, still erased chalk circles when no one was watching. But now, there was a light in his eyes, a fire that hadn't been there in years, not because he'd returned to war, but because he'd helped others find peace in their precision. He hadn't taken the shot that day in Mosul, but here, each recruit he guided, each life he sharpened, was a shot taken, a hit that mattered. Redemption doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes beside you, quietly, and waits. The ceremony wasn't grand. No marching band, no flashing lights, just a few rows of folding chairs, a podium, and a backdrop of bullet-riddled targets. But the air felt thick. Electric, word had spread, not just among the recruits, but across the base. Through whispered stories, rumors turned legend, and legends, they draw attention. Marcus stood off to the side, still in his flannel, still holding the broom. He didn't know why he was invited, didn't want a spotlight, didn't care for applause. Brooks approached, with a soft smile. "You'll want to hear this one." Marcus shook his head. "I'm just here to sweep." Brooks patted his shoulder. "Maybe it's time people saw what else you've cleaned up." He walked to the podium, cleared his throat. The room hushed. "I've served with warriors, led them, buried them. But every now and then you meet someone who changes what leadership even means." He paused. "Today we recognize someone who never asked to be seen, who taught without demanding, who led by example, by silence, by presence." Whispers rippled. All eyes turned to Marcus. Brooks continued. "This man saved more shots, by not taking one than most ever will, by pulling the trigger." He held up a plaque, simple, engraved with a quote, "True aim begins within." "Marcus Delroy," Brooks said, "come forward." Applause erupted, but Marcus didn't move, not right away. His fingers gripped the broom. Tighter. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, each step a lifetime. He took the plaque, held it like it was heavier than it looked, and nodded. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Back in the barracks, the recruits hung photos, not of guns, not of medals, but of chalk circles, hand-drawn, centered, steady. Legends don't always ride in with fanfare. Sometimes they walk with a limp, carry a broom, and leave behind cleaner hearts than floors. The janitor was no longer just a man with a mop. He was the mark everyone aimed for, the center they didn't know they were missing, until he showed them how to find it, not with noise, not with pride, but with stillness and the quiet pull of a steady hand. So what do? With a story like this, we remember it, we tell it, we carry it. Because Marcus Delroy isn't just a character, he's a reminder. That the strongest people might not shout, might not stand in the spotlight, but they shape lives with quiet integrity, and in a world full of noise, their silence is thunder. So the next time you see someone invisible, someone overlooked, look closer. You might be staring at a legend, a protector, a hero with a broom in his hand, and a whole world on his shoulders. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that matter. And if this story moved you, share it, because some legends deserve to be seen.